Hi friends, welcome to my channel. For those of you new here, my name is Donna. Thank you so much for coming. I'm super happy that you found me. If you're looking for colorful eye looks, a little bit of grunginess, a little bit of me telling you it doesn't matter what age you are, please do what you want to do, because I am over 40 and I am wearing all the color and the glitter and the yes, please. You have found the right place. I'm super happy to have you here. I typically dabble with all things like high-end, but today I actually have a super exciting video in which I am dabbling in Juvia's place, and it is one of the affordable brands that I absolutely stand. So today I am ranking the 12 Juvia's Place palettes that are in my collection, and I hope that you are down because I am excited and also down for this video. Who doesn't want another ranking video? Not me, not me. I love ranking videos. So that is why we are here today. And if you are interested, just keep on watching. I do have 12 Juvia's Place palettes. There are 2 in my collection I have not yet used. Number 12 in my Juvia's Place ranking video is going to be this one. And it is because I have not used it yet. I am ranking it in lower than the number 11 one, which I also haven't used, simply because of the color story. Like, this is not a color story I see myself pulling for every single day, whereas the next palette you will see is more of like an everyday kind of palette. It is a palette that many people would consider an everyday palette. This just isn't, right? And that's okay, because this is actually my kind of color story, whereas the other one maybe isn't. But with that said, this one does have a multi-chrome in it, which is this guy over here. I'm so excited to use. The other reason why this is coming in at number 12, and I can't imagine that it will ever rank up super high on my list, is because of the glitters. There's pressed glitters in this palette. This is a pressed glitter. This is a pressed glitter. I do believe these two are also pressed glitters, and I am not a pressed glitter fan. I am actually pretty terrified of glitter. So with that said, this one does come in at number 12. I'm anxious to see where it will rank after I've used it, but for now, that's where it is. Number 11 in my collection is going to be this one. This is the Juvia's Place Nubian 3. This is the Coral palette. And you guys, when this launched, I had to pick it up. It is so pretty and kind of right up my alley. I do love these reds and corals and oranges on my eyes. I think that it looks stunning on my eyes, and it's the closest that I get to liking like a neutral eye color, right? This is by no means neutral, but it's so pretty, and this would be like my form of neutral. I just haven't used it yet. I have to imagine that once I have used this palette, it will probably come up a lot higher in my ranking list, but for now, this is where it sits because I have not used it yet. All right, number 10 in my collection is this one. This is the Warrior 3. So this one sits at number 10 because there's just, you guys, I love these colors. Let me just pause and say I love every single one of these palettes. There isn't a palette in my collection that I don't love. But this is a complementary palette in my opinion. It's not a palette that I can create one eye look from cohesively. For I had it in a palette roulette, and it was super difficult to use over a week without having like a crazy eye every single time. And sometimes you just want a regular eye look, and I just don't think that this palette does that or can do that. And then number 9 in my collection is actually one that is, you know, rather beautiful and can be used across the board in eye looks to, you know, it can be used for a month and probably you would have some really great normal eye looks as well as pretty colorful eye looks. I just didn't like the colors in here. Like, I thought that I was going to, but because it's so primary, it is hard to come up with an eye look that I deemed good enough for whatever I'm going for. Like, not often are you wearing something that is so primary in color, and I think that's why I don't get along with this palette as much as I want to. This green is a beautiful green though, and this silver also a beautiful silver, but other than that, because this is such a primary color story, I have a hard time with this palette, which is why it ranks the way it does. It does rank higher than the Warrior 3 palette though, because it is a palette that I do believe you can get multiple eye looks from, including a regular everyday work appropriate eye. This would be ranked at number 8 in my palette. This is the Festival palette, and you guys, I actually quite love the Festival palette, to be honest. I just you know, there are others, something's got to come in this place, and this is probably it. With this palette, I feel like the mattes in the palette don't necessarily perfectly complement the shimmers in the palette. I hated that the black in the palette was a shimmer. It's kind of like a satiny shimmer, and I think that's why this came in this place. I also just don't think that this is a super cohesive color story to have to utilize for any one eye look. I do think it could be cohesive, and I do think that you get more normal or work appropriate looks out of this palette than you would, say, the Warrior 3 palette. This should have been an all matte palette, is what it should have been. I would have loved this if it were an all matte palette. So number 7 in my collection, and some people might hate me for this, number 7 in my collection is this guy here. This is the Magic Mini. I just don't like this palette as much as many people do. Yes, it's got 2 rows of warm and 2 rows of cool, but it's so shimmery. There are so many more shimmers in here. This literally has 6 mattes, and the 6 mattes are this really dark blue here, this really dark purple here, and these two, and these two. Like, I just don't think that I would have loved to have had maybe 2 more dark colorful mattes. So that's really, I think when I did my palette roulette on it, I said this really could have done with another, at least 1 more dark colorful matte, because these 2 tones here are close enough that when they're on an eye look together, they look almost the exact same. So I think that we could have had like a green colorful matte, or like even a black colorful matte, but then here again we have this black here that's really not a black. It's more of like a grungy like charcoal, which is fine because it is more of a satin than it is a matte. I just didn't get along with this palette as much as everybody else did. I know that this is a favorite for so many people, but it's just meh in my collection. And that's why it comes in at number 7. It ranks up higher than some of the other ones that you've seen because it does have the thought process of warms and cools in it, colorfuls and neutrals in it, and that's what makes it rank up a little bit more high in the collection. So then we move to number 6, and number 6 is going to be Zulu. So Zulu is a beautiful, beautiful color story. And I do think that this is a palette that you can pull some really amazing looks out of. But this is a palette, again, that you have to pull really amazing looks out of. You cannot, truly cannot get a very work appropriate eye with this palette. And that's not my end all speak all. Obviously, I'm the queen of color. But I do think that when people look at a palette, they want to see what can be done with it. This also has these 3 here are shimmers, and I think it could have done with 1 more shimmer in the palette. I think there could have been 10 shades in this and it would have been a perfect palette. So I love this palette. This is one of my favorite Juvia's Place palettes to play with, especially in the summertime. But even this, like, this brown here isn't like super, super brown. It's more of an orange. And when you get this brown and this orange in an eye look together, it just looks like the same color, honestly. I feel like that would be the closest to an everyday eye that you could get. But again, the color story of this palette isn't super conducive to be able to utilize this. But again, it's a companion piece. Let me just stop right here too. I hear myself saying it over and over again, and I want to punch myself in the face. most of Juvia's Place palettes are going to be companion pieces to your collection. So there's that. But I also like to think of it through the lens of what can I do with this besides a crazy like Instagrammable eye, and many of the palettes that are companion pieces don't perform in a way that you can also get a regular everyday eye. This one, however, has a crazy color story, is an amazing springtime palette, and you can also get some really great everyday eye looks from it as well. This is the Deuce palette, and this is what it looks like inside. So this is a really great palette for being an out-of-the-box color story, but also conducive to each other, like very complementary to each other. So this is actually a really pretty, like almost salmon-y color, dusty rose. This is a very, very beautiful like cream color shade. This one is a really nice deep dark brown that's really great for deepening up an eye look. You have some really beautiful shimmers in here that go with all the other colors in here. The only one that I don't particularly love, but I love the tone of it, is this gray here. It does kind of lend to texture a little bit, so you have to be super careful when you're putting it on your eye, especially if you are a woman of your 40s and want to wear those shimmery shades but don't want it to cause more crepey, or the look of more crepiness than what you maybe already have on your eye look. You do have to handle that one with kitten gloves. I would say the best way to put it on would be with your finger, because then it kind of melts into your skin. But the rest of them, so pretty. This green here is beautiful in an eye look, and it actually looks really good with these browns too. I think that this is just such a beautiful color story and a beautiful palette by them, but still also kind of an out-of-the-box kind of palette. I think the biggest reason why is because I can still do an Instagram eye with this, but also get a work appropriate eye with this. And for those of you that do not know, I do work at Ulta Beauty, so work appropriate is this could be work appropriate, honestly. So I don't really look at a palette and go, ooh, neutrals, work appropriate. But I do know that that's a thing for a lot of people out there. This is the Nomad palette, and this one is a beautiful cool toned eye palette. I didn't have as much fun with this palette as I wanted to, but I think honestly it just comes down to whether I feel confident enough with my cool tone eye looks. And this is a beautiful cool tone eye look palette. You have some really pretty like olive tones and really pretty like grungy greens, and this is where the grunge girl in me like really wanted to perform. What I would say though about this palette is it does have some shadows in it that really, like, we don't need both of these yellows. One of them does have a little bit of glitter in it, but it's not like glitter that shows up on your eye. And this yellow is very similar to the other one. In an eye look, it doesn't look any different. But I do love the two shimmers in this palette are these two here, and they are perfect shimmers for this palette. I think this one was just really put together very well. It does have a lot of deeper tones in it. It also has a lot of lighter tones in it. If you wanted an all matte eye, you could definitely get that from this. There is like a crazy windstorm going on outside, so if you guys can hear my windows rattling, that's what it is. My beauty room is a fishbowl. I do have pocket windows. I live in a house that's 112 years old, so my beauty room has pocket windows all around me, which means they slide into the wall instead of opening up like regular windows. So the rattling is the wind and those windows rattling. This was just a really pretty perfect color story to put together for that cool tone. It does have a little bit of warmth in it, but it is mostly cool tone, and it's going to help you bridge that gap between a warm eye and a cool eye. Number 3, and it is Tribe. So if you are new here, green is my favorite color. I don't find a lot of palettes that have green in them that I get along with very well. Most green eyeshadows are super hard to formulate. These greens in this palette are by far the most amazing greens I have in my collection, and I would say, like, it's not as green as everybody thinks it was. You can't get this palette anymore. I wish you could, because it's an amazing palette, but What I would say about this is it has some dark tones, it has some light tones, and all of the colors perfectly go together. These make a perfect eye look. These make a perfect eye look. These make a perfect eye look. And then all around, like, I think that this palette was put together very well. And I think that the tones of green in this palette are the perfect tones of green to help create an amazing eye look. I don't like this yellow. That's the only thing that I don't like in this palette, because I feel like it was supposed to be kind of like this chartreusey green color, and it's more like neon yellow, and it doesn't show up on my skin at all. But everything else in this palette is beautiful. Even this tone here, it is called Chaga. It is a really pretty, like, just really pretty, like, green gold oliviness. Is so pretty on an eye look. And this, even though it looks very brown, it kind of has like this olive nature to it, so it perfectly complements the rest of the tones in this palette. And just green is my favorite color, so like this had to come in the top 3 if I'm honest, and that is why it is. All right, number 2 in my collection would have to be this one here. This is the Saharan 2. These shades are actually some of my favorite on my eyes. I love greens on my eyes, even though at one point in time I hated greens on my eyes, but I really love reds and oranges on my eyes, and this very much is the epitome of the color story that I love on my eyes. These 2 blues are actually really pretty. This is one of the first Juvia's Place palettes I ever got, and while it is a little bit too heavy in shimmers, I think those shimmers really go pretty perfectly with every other color. You can do so much with just these 3 mattes that are in here and all these shimmers. What I do wish it had in it is a blue matte, like a dark blue matte, because that would be perfect with those 2, but I think it would have messed up the overall story that they were trying to sell you with this palette. I don't necessarily think we needed 2 rows of shimmers, but I do think that those 2 rows of shimmers perfectly pair with the 3 mattes that we do have in this. And what I love the most about Juvia's Place is that all of their palettes, like how big these pans are, they perfectly complement anybody's lack of whatever in their makeup collection. So lack of contour, lack of bronzer, lack of blush. You definitely can use all of these in any way, shape, or form that you want to on your body. Your face. That was weird how that came out. So my number 1 palette from Juvia's Place would have to be the Masquerade palette. And this was my very first Juvia's Place palette. My daughter bought it for me, so maybe there's that sentimentality about it. But I really feel like this palette just encompasses everything I need it to encompass. So again, we have 2 rows of neutral tones, 2 rows of brights. But these brights are the brights that are up my alley more so than the ones in the Magic Mini palette. Those ones are a little more not as bright. But also, like, I have a lot more of the neutral mattes to help me really kind of ground an eye look, right? So we have these 2 and these 2 and then this one and this one. So I'm not missing anything in this palette. I feel like we could have used a matte blue to go with the greens and the purples, but there again, like, I feel like even this color could perfectly pair with the greens and the purples because it blends out so beautifully. With that said, these blues also blend out so beautifully. One thing that I love about some of these kind of shades with Juvia's Place is even though they're shimmery, they still look rather nice blended out. A lot of shimmers kind of get weird and wonky when you start to blend them out. Juvia's Place shimmers do not. I love this palette. This is a perfect palette for a beginner, I would say, because you have a little bit of everything. I love this palette. It is my number 1 palette, but everything has opportunity, right? I just think that this is an amazing palette, and I couldn't be happier to have it in my collection. I feel like it's a palette that I could take with me. It could be my one and only palette. because it has the deepening up shades. It has a nice like light toned shimmer for brow bone and inner corner. It has some great transition tones. I do feel like it could be a little bit too deep for some people, but for me it's pretty perfect. So with that being said, those are the 12 palettes that I have from Juvia's Place and how I would rank them in my collection. I do hope that you enjoyed this. How many Juvia's Place palettes do you have and how would you rank them? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this ranking, and let me know if you'd like to see anything else I have ranked. I need to go before the wind tears down my room back here. This is so crazy how windy it is out there. So with that, you guys, that is it. That is all I have for you. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you did, you're considering giving it a big thumbs up. It really does help our channels out here. I also hope that you're considering subscribing before you go. If you do that, please don't forget to hit the notification bell. It will make sure that you are notified every single time I upload something. I'll show up in your feed, and that would be the best thing ever. If you're interested in seeing something else from me right now, YouTube should be suggesting something to you here in a couple minutes, and if it's your time to go, that's cool too. Thank you so much for joining me today. That is all I have for you. So you guys, just stay safe out there, cookies. Stay healthy. Love each other, but love each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.